The movie starts on a desert-like planet called Arrakis Chani. A Fremen woman recounts the oppressive rule of the Harkonnens, who exploit the valuable mineral melange, also known as spice. Spice is only found on the planet Arrakis. The Fremen have long fought to rid their planet of these tyrants, but with limited success. However, recent orders from the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV have commanded the Harkonnens to vacate Arrakis, leaving the Fremen wondering about the planet's future rulers. Meanwhile, on the lush planet Caladan, Paul Atreides shares breakfast with his mother, Lady Jessica, Duke Leto Atreides' concubine, and a member of the Bene Gesserit Order, an exclusive sisterhood comprised of members who possess advanced physical and mental abilities. Lady Jessica attempts to teach Paul these abilities, testing him with a simple task. During the test, Paul attempts to use his abilities to compel Lady Jessica to pass him a glass of water, but his success is only partial. As they discuss Arrakis and its significance as the sole source of the spice, they delve into its importance for interstellar travel and the intricate politics surrounding its control. Duke Leto Atreides, accompanied by his loyal soldiers Gurney Halleck and Thufir Hawat, receives an imperial envoy, formalizing the transfer of Arrakis to House Atreides. The Emperor's decision reflects his concerns over Leto's growing influence within the Landsred, prompting this strategic move. Leto recognizes that his appointment to oversee Arrakis is a trap of some kind, but he cannot refuse an imperial offer. Paul asks his friend, the elite soldier Duncan Idaho, to take him along when Duncan goes to Arrakis weeks ahead of time to scout things out, but Duncan refuses. Paul confides that he's been having dreams about Arrakis and the Fremen, including one where Duncan falls in battle. Duncan dismisses this as merely a dream, telling Paul that everything important happens when we're awake. Paul discusses his wish to travel to Arrakis early with his father, Leto, expressing a desire to see the situation firsthand. However, Leto refuses, emphasizing the importance of having Paul by his side due to the political intricacies at play. He explains that the Emperor has orchestrated a conflict between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, aiming to weaken both houses for his own benefit. Instead of falling into this trap, Leto plans to form an alliance with the Fremen, utilizing their formidable desert power to counter the Emperor's schemes. Despite Paul's doubts about his own leadership abilities, Leto reassures him, drawing parallels to his own journey to leadership and expressing confidence that Paul will find his path just as he did. Gurney engages in a sparring session with Paul, emphasizing the need for caution and ruthlessness in facing the dangers posed by the Harkonnens. Meanwhile, Paul begins experiencing dreams involving Chani, a Freeman woman. Jessica's superior from the Bene Gesserit, Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam, arrives on Caladan to administer a test to Paul. Prior to the examination, Paul is examined by Suk Dr. Wellington Yue, who warns him about the Bene Gesserit's hidden agenda. During the test, Mohiam subjects Paul to the Gom Jabbar, a trial involving a poisoned needle and a pain-inducing box to assess his character. After the test, Mohiam questions Paul about his dreams and their potential significance. She then admonishes Jessica for bearing a son for Duke Leto instead of the daughters the Bene Gesserit had intended. Mohiam warns Jessica about the dangers Paul may face as a result of his unique abilities and the prophecy surrounding him. Following Mohiam's departure, Paul confronts his mother about the revelations. Jessica explains the Bene Gesserit's centuries-long breeding program aimed at producing a being known as the Kwisatz Haderach, possessing unparalleled mental abilities to perceive both past and future events. Upon their arrival on Arrakis, the Atreides are greeted by chanting locals, invoking the prophecy of the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world, believed to be a messiah figure foretold on Arrakis. Although Paul is skeptical, his mother, Jessica, explains the significance of the prophecy and how some locals view Paul as its fulfillment. However, Paul dismisses it as a superstition propagated by the Bene Gesserit. Jessica hires a Fremen servant named Shadut Mapes, who sees Jessica and Paul as embodiments of the Lisan al-Gaib prophecy. Mapes presents Jessica with a dagger crafted from the tooth of a sandworm, a symbol of the perilous desert environment of Arrakis. Later that night, while studying a holographic image, Paul narrowly escapes an assassination attempt by a hunter-seeker drone. Mapes' timely intervention saves him, sparking Paul's curiosity and raising questions about his safety on Arrakis. Leto explores his new domain on Arrakis and uncovers extensive sabotage perpetrated by the departing Harkonnens, severely hindering vital infrastructure. Seeking a resolution, Leto consults with Liet Kynes, an ecologist who serves as the imperial arbiter overseeing the transition. Meanwhile, Duncan Idaho returns from his time among the Fremen, sharing crucial insights with the Duke. Duncan reveals the Fremen's remarkable combat prowess and their unique way of life in subterranean communities known as Sietchs. He confirms the suspicions of Thufir Hawat, the Atreides' trusted advisor, regarding the substantial Fremen population. Stilgar, the leader of one such Sietch, meets with Leto to negotiate terms. Stilgar insists that the Outworlders remain within the city limits, except for spice mining operations. Leto rejects this demand, but pledges to respect the sanctity of Sietchs and vows not to persecute the Fremen during his rule. Paul extends an invitation for Stilgar to stay, but the Fremen leader departs. Duncan introduces the Atreides to Fremen technology, including the ingenious moisture-saving stillsuits and thumpers used to lure sandworms, shedding light on the intricate ways of the desert-dwelling people. Leto's party convenes with Liet Kynes to inspect the spice mining operations, where she notices Paul's intuitive adaptation of the still suit, remarking in the native tongue, "He shall know your ways as if born to them." The group proceeds to observe a spice mining operation in action, witnessing a sandcrawler attract a colossal worm with its rhythmic vibrations. Efforts to remove the sandcrawler using a flying carryall fail, prompting Duke Leto to land his ornithopters nearby to rescue the miners. As Paul guides the miners to safety, he is exposed to a massive dose of spice, triggering a series of intense visions, including one featuring himself and Chani. Just as he nearly succumbs to the sand, Gurney intervenes, pulling him to safety aboard his father's ornithopter. From the safety of the air, they witness the sandcrawler being devoured whole by the massive worm's-toothed maw. Later, Dr. Yue examines Paul, reassuring him and Lady Jessica that while the spice is psychoactive, it should not cause harm. Duke Leto wakes in the dead of night with a foreboding sense of danger. Upon investigating, he discovers Mape is murdered and is then shot with a paralytic dart by Yue, who reveals himself as a traitor. Leto learns that Yue has betrayed them under Duress. The Harkonnens hold his wife captive, compelling his compliance. Yue implants a poison capsule in one of Leto's teeth, hoping it will be used to kill the Baron. Meanwhile, Gurney leads a counter-attack against the invading Harkonnen forces, bolstered by Imperial Sardaukar troops. Despite their valiant efforts, the Atreides soldiers, caught off guard and outnumbered, struggle to repel the overwhelming assault. Duncan attempts to rescue Paul and Jessica, but arrives too late. They have already been taken. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, honoring his promise to Mohiam and the Bene Gesserit, orders some of his men to take Paul and Jessica to the desert to die of exposure. However, Paul, tapping into his latent Bene Gesserit abilities, uses the voice to manipulate one of the men into removing Jessica's gag. Seizing the opportunity, Jessica commands another man to kill his comrade, leading to a deadly struggle where she eliminates two assailants herself. Their ornithopter is then remotely disabled, forcing them to land and witness the devastation of Arrakeen from afar. Meanwhile, Yue confronts Baron Harkonnen, demanding that he uphold his part of the bargain. In response, the Baron deceitfully promises Yue a reunion with his wife, before callously slitting his throat. However, Leto, paralyzed but resourceful, activates the poison capsule, concealed in his tooth, unleashing a deadly toxin that kills everyone in the room except the Baron, who narrowly survives thanks to his protective body shield and anti-gravity suspensors. Medical technicians then work to nurse the gravely affected Baron back to health. Riding out a storm in a survival tent, Paul continues to experience intense visions induced by his exposure to spice. Initially, his visions focus on Chani, but they quickly turn to scenes of bloody conflict and religious fervor. In these visions, zealots bearing the Atreides flag and acting in Duke Leto's name spread across the galaxy like an unstoppable force. Paul is deeply disturbed by these visions and initially blames his mother and the Bene Gesserit for their consequences. However, Jessica eventually comforts him, helping him find solace amidst the chaos. Duncan Idaho, having escaped the slaughter, rescues Paul and Jessica and brings them to Liet Kynes, who has established a refuge in an abandoned terraforming station inhabited by the Fremen. However, the Sardaukar track them down and launch an attack. In the ensuing battle, many Sardaukar are killed by the fierce Fremen fighters. Duncan makes a heroic last stand to buy time for Paul, Jessica, and Kynes to escape. As they flee, Kynes sets up a thumper to attract a sandworm for transportation. However, she is mortally wounded by the Sardaukar before they can escape. In a final act of defiance, Kynes summons a sandworm, intending to use it as their means of escape. As the Sardaukar move in for the kill, the sandworm arrives, and Kynes attracts it to her location by pounding the drumsand. In a dramatic turn of events, they are all swallowed by the massive worm. While navigating the ornithopter through a ferocious sandstorm, Paul experiences a profound vision imparted by a Fremen man. The man advises Paul to understand that survival in the desert requires attunement to the natural rhythms of the environment, urging him to move with the flow rather than against it. Acting on this insight, Paul retracts the ornithopter's wings, allowing the storm's powerful vortex to carry them deeper into the desert. Despite sustaining damage to the ornithopter, they manage to survive the ordeal. With the ornithopter rendered inoperable, Paul and Jessica embark on foot towards what they believe to be the location of the Fremen Sietch. Along the way, their presence attracts the attention of a massive sandworm. They scramble for cover behind nearby rocks as the creature pauses, seemingly scrutinizing Paul for a few tense moments before being lured away by the sound of a thumper. Subsequently, they are apprehended by a group of freemen, among whom is Stilgar, who recognizes Paul and asserts that they cannot harm him. However, Jamis, another freeman present, dismisses Stilgar's caution and advocates for killing Paul and Jessica in order to plunder their belongings. Paul realizes that Jamis is the same man from his visions, adding a layer of tension to their encounter with the Fremen. Jessica's plea for assistance in returning to Caladan falls on deaf ears as Stilgar dismisses the notion of rewards, considering them inconsequential in the harsh desert environment of Arrakis. However, Stilgar extends an offer for Paul to join their Sietch due to his youth, albeit at the cost of leaving Jessica behind, whom he deems too old to adapt to their way of life. Refusing to accept this separation, Jessica and Paul draw upon their formidable Bene Gesserit training to disarm most of the Fremen and hold Stilgar at knife point. Recognizing Jessica's true identity as a Bene Gesserit, Stilgar relents and agrees to take both of them to the Sietch. However, Jamis objects to their inclusion and challenges Jessica to a duel. Paul steps forward to act as his mother's champion in the duel, a decision fraught with peril given Fremen's tradition of duels to the death. In a moment of compassion, Chani, among those present, offers Paul her Christ knife, a potent symbol from one of his visions. Despite Paul's superior skill, he hesitates to deliver a fatal blow to Jamis, leading Stilgar to remind him of the stakes involved in Fremen duels. With reluctance and the weight of his newfound responsibilities, Paul ultimately takes Jamis' life, a moment of profound significance marking his entry into the harsh world of Arrakis. Satisfied with this resolution, the Fremen agree to escort Paul and Jessica back to their Sietch, where their fates will become further entwined with the desert planet's enigmatic inhabitants. Paul and Jessica witness a Fremen riding a live worm. As they set out on their journey into the desert, Chani tells Paul that this is only the beginning, and the first part of the movie ends here.